Today, my sermon's called, Would You Know Him? A few days back, I was talking with my wife about, I just want more. I want so much more. And I've listened to literally since I've been little, probably tens of thousands of sermons, because I've always been a pastor's son, and we've had more sermons, more church services than almost any other church I've known. During the summer, we always had at least one service a day, and now we have 3 services a day, and even that's not enough for me. I go home and I watch YouTube videos of different preachers and different things, but there comes a point quite often in my life that I just can't get enough. It's just all becoming preaching. It's just all words of man, and it just has not the power of God. Don't get me wrong, the preaching is amazing and wonderful, but as the hunger increases in my heart, they can only take me to the point that they're at, and I want more. I want so much more of God. And I've struggled with that so much, and a lot of times I just end up getting kind of disgusted at it, just like, where is the men that truly know God? I want to hear a true sermon that just rips me apart and brings me into the presence of God. I want to know God more than anything. And my wife said, only if you could go listen to Jesus, really listen to Jesus. I was like, go back in time, and Sid spent 3 years at Jesus' feet. And then Catherine spoke reality, well, if you went back in time, you wouldn't be able to speak the language, and you're not a Hebrew. They wouldn't let you in the synagogues. They wouldn't let you into the temple. You wouldn't be able to really follow Jesus. Jesus might talk to you, might speak to you, but you're not a Jew. And so it's like, oh, if only I could some way, just know God, just know Jesus. And I was like, well, maybe if he had just for some reason come along in my time. And Catherine posed me the question, would you know him if he actually came during our time? And I was thinking, of course I would. Of course I would know him. And then after we got done talking, I just kind of was talking to God, and he began to speak to me and continue what my wife asked me. Would you know Jesus if he came during a time? Right off the bat, of course I said, of course, God, I would know Jesus. And then it just kept leading in my heart, would you know him? So I began to listen to that and truly just look up verses that God put in there. And this morning, I know we all have this beautiful image of Jesus. All the pictures paint this beautiful picture of Jesus. But the reality is the Jesus that we all think we know isn't at all the way we picture him. He is now in Revelation, the way they describe him in Revelation. But as he was here on the earth, he wasn't as what we think of him. And I'm going to point these scriptures out for you, and then I'm going to show you why God asked me this, because it really hit me. And I'm going to show you why all this is the way I'm talking about, the way I'm talking about this. So, first scripture, we all know, but we all kind of pass over. Isaiah 53, this is a prophecy before Jesus even came along about Jesus. Isaiah 53, 2 and 3. For he, this is God, for God shall grow up before him as a tender plant and a root out of dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness. And when we shall see him, there will be no beauty in him that we should desire him. Right here, he's talking about Jesus. There will be no beauty in Jesus that we shall desire him. And to us, that's like, what? But he's saying that Jesus was not beautiful. He wasn't somebody that we would desire at seeing him. But it gets even greater than that, worse. It says here in the scriptures that he was despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. This means that he knew sorrows even before he began his speaking. Before his 30th birthday, he was a man of sorrows, rejected of men, acquainted with grief, and even afterwards, after he began his ministry. And we hid our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. All we like sheep have gone astray, and we have turned every one unto his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Jesus was despised, and the people looked away from him. And you're thinking, no, they gathered around him, they followed him. But if you were to truly follow out Jesus' life journey, you will find out exactly what this says is true. And I'm going to begin with that journey. In John 1, the first chapter, Peter comes to, Philip comes to find his brother Nathaniel. Or is it not his brother? Anyway, Philip findeth Nathanael, and he said unto him, We have found him whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip said unto him, Come and see. This is a rather weird question for me, because why would Nathanael say, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Well, this perks interest. So you go back and you find out that Nazareth was a slum. Not only was it a slum, it was a ghetto. It was one of the worst places in the current time. So we see that Jesus grew up in a dark position. I once heard someone talk about a book about how Jesus grew up in a prime position, a prime location, and that everybody magnified and glorified him, and he didn't know why. But that's a bunch of bull. Jesus grew up in Nazareth, and he was also, they allude to it quite a few times in the Bible. Almost all the Pharisees, when they talk to Jesus, you're a bastard. I know that's a mean and horrible word, and that's exactly what they thought Jesus was. And in them days, that was something really horrible to look down on. So here Jesus is growing up. He grew up in a horrible place, and he was known as So we keep reading. And we begin to actually think about, okay, Jesus now comes out of the desert, 40 days in the desert. And his clothes are definitely not very presentable as he comes out of the desert. And then he begins to preach a rather weird message. From that time, Jesus began to preach and to say, Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. This seems, because we hear it all the time, this seems so simple. But if you were to really look at it during that time and period, the preaching of this message does not make any sense at all. This is like saying that the 1,000-year reign has already begun, and Jesus sits on the throne, and New Jerusalem is here on earth. Because this is exactly what the Jews believed would happen. They believed that God in the flesh would come down, and he would rule over the earth, and they would rule and reign with him. And this is exactly, they believe, basically, the 1,000-year reign. And here's Jesus saying, the kingdom is here. The kingdom is at hand. This is a weird doctrine. And this is, at first, sets him apart. And then people were like, what? You're insane. Because in reality, they were still under the control of Rome. They had oppression massively from Rome, and God's hand was not anywhere to be seen. But here's Jesus saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Then we look at Jesus' first disciples. They're fishermen, not men in renown, not pastors' sons, not pastors, not Pharisees, not anything. And to us, Miss Fisherman sounds kind of funky, but it could be likened probably unto trashmen of today's society. And then we look at his first miracle. This is just I'm trying to build up an image of what Jesus was that's a little bit contrary to what we see him as. He's walking around with fishermen, not men in renown, nothing, and he probably isn't dressed like we believe him to be dressed. And then we look at his first miracle, turning water into wine. I wonder what the pastors would say if Jesus came along and turned water into a wine today. I mean, that's his first miracle. Believe it or not, your first accomplishment is quite renowned, and people know about it everywhere. So his first miracle is turning water into wine. That's, wow, that's pretty amazing. Why would you turn water into wine? Okay. And then we see in Mark 2:14, and as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Theus, sitting at the receipt of customs, and he said unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. And it came to pass that Jesus sat and meat in his house, in Levi's house. Many publicans and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples, for they were many, and they followed him. So now we see, next thing you know, this is right off the bat. He does this miracle. He starts talking to the wicked, and he starts hanging around with the wicked. He starts eating with the wicked, and next thing you know, he's actually sitting in a known house of wickedness. He's sitting in a known house of unrighteous, unholy people, and he's eating with them. They know that this person is involved in all different types of sins. He is despised. Back then, tax collectors, receipt of customs were extremely, extremely despised. It's like Jesus sitting down in, I don't know, think of the worst place you could think of. A mafia lord's den, and everybody knows he's a mafia lord, or maybe a nightclub that has open stripping, or something like that. This is where Jesus is at. This is where Jesus is at. He's sitting with these people. He's eating with them. So now we have a man who comes from a slum. He might speak a little bit of ghetto language because he talked normal to the people. He doesn't speak as the righteous people speak of that day. He doesn't have that air to himself. He speaks with authority, but he doesn't speak with the way, us preachers speak, or another preacher would speak. He speaks as a normal person that grew up in the situation he grew up in. And he talks normally to these other sinners, and he hangs out with these other sinners, and they follow him. And just think about that. If you were today we hear about this man who all of a sudden begins to have a following, and he's hanging out in bars, and he's hanging out in nightclubs, hanging out in places that we know there's stripping, and that they know there's horrible things going on, and Jesus is hanging out there with them. And then because he's getting such a following, the preachers of the day, the modern preachers of the day, begin to look at him, trying to figure out, why in the world is this guy so famous? What's going on? And one of the first things he does, and behold, they brought unto him a man sick of the palsy, laying on the bed. And Jesus, seeing their face, said unto the man, the sick of palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. This, not only is he preaching a word of doctrine, now he just blasphemed. Extremely blasphemed, because could know unto us, unto the preachers, the people who are righteous, supposedly righteous of the time, he just massively blasphemed. Who has the right to forgive people's sins? No one but God. And he's making himself like unto God. Then we keep going in this situation. Even John, even the disciples, and they came to him, the disciples of John. Everybody knows John is amazing. He's out there preaching, repent. But a lot of the Pharisees, a lot of the people, good people of the time, a lot of the preachers, the synagogue leaders, they're not sure whether John is of God or not either. But now even John is questioning him, disciples of John, saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast oft, but you and your disciples do not? So now they're even questioning Jesus. Why don't you fast? What's going on? You don't even fast. You act weird. You're all hanging out with all these people. And then Matthew 11. Jesus says this of himself. This is the way they are starting to see Jesus. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, behold, a man gluttonous and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. So Jesus said, this is their image of me. I'm a winebibber and a friend of sinners and gluttonous. Mark 2:23, and it came to pass that he went through the corns of the field on the Sabbath day, and his disciples began as they went to pluck the ears of the corn. And the Pharisees said unto him, behold, why do they do this on the Sabbath, which is not lawful? So not only does he hang out with the sinners and doesn't fast, and his doctrine's extremely weird, and he blasphemes, now his disciples and him break the Sabbath, which was extremely important to them at the time. Extremely important. So now we have a man that the entire church world, the entire righteous world, the supposed righteous world at the time, has looked at and said, this man is a winebibber, he's gluttonous, he hangs out with sinners, and he blasphemes, his doctrine's insane, and he sins. And later on, he even tells a man to carry his what do they call that? His bed on the Sabbath day. And if you know anything about the laws of Moses, back when the laws of Moses first came in, the Ten Commandments first came into play, a man went out and he started to pick up sticks. And Moses went before God, and he said, what am I supposed to do with this man, God? And you know what God told him? Stone him. Stone him. So this is a serious offense. So he's telling other people to sin, his disciples to sin, and then here he's in a synagogue, and a man comes before him with a withered hand, all withered up like this. And Jesus looks about the people around him with anger, and being grieved with the hardness of the heart, he said unto the man, stretch forth thy hand. And he stretched it out, and the hand was restored whole as the others. And the Pharisees went forth straightway, took counsel with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. So, not only does his followers sin, not only does he tell other people to sin, now he sins out blatantly. He kills somebody on the Sabbath day. Then he makes it worse later on by actually speaking against the Pharisees. He openly defies the Pharisees over and over again, openly. Now, we think of the Pharisees as pompous, righteous, blah, blah, wicked men. But the reality is it wasn't like that. During this time, for the last 200 years, the nation of Israel has turned, nation of Judah, has turned back to God. They have established synagogues. They have began to once again follow the laws of Moses. See, unlike their processors, where they had groves and gods and worshipped other gods, now they don't do that. They instead are following the laws of Moses to a T, to an exact T. Unlike all the processors before them, who would sin every 40 years, for the last 200 years, they have obeyed God. They are righteous people. The only problem is that unlike their predecessors that turned back to God and cried out to God, they turned back to the law. They turn to the law, not to God. But they believe full-heartedly that they are right with God. And the same thing with the preachers, the Pharisees and the priests of the time. They believe full-heartedly they are right with God. And here's Jesus openly speaking out against them. So it's not like Jesus is coming against the preachers of sinning, you can do whatever you want to go to heaven. No, Jesus has come against people as we would see them maybe as David Wilkerson or maybe Billy Sunday, people that we know, that we think fully, completely are right with God. And Jesus is openly coming out against them. And then he does something even more unthinkable. He goes into, I'm going to go ahead and read it because everybody knows the story. He goes into the most holy place, the biggest church of the time, and he makes a whip, and he starts whipping people and throwing them out of the temple, out, saying you cannot sell here. He has no authority to do this, but he goes in and he cleans house. This is like him walking into the biggest church in America, the one that's known, maybe Times Square Church, and start taking a whip and whipping people. And the Pharisees are insanely upset about this, as we would be. All the righteous, supposedly people that know God, that supposedly are following the law of God, are now extremely upset with Jesus. This is Jesus. This is exactly how it would be if Jesus came in earth today. This is just, I'm painting an image of who Jesus really was on the earth. He was not a friend, sadly. He was not a friend of the pastors and the preachers of the time. He was the exact opposite. He was a friend to the wicked people. He was a friend to the people who were known sinners. He preached a weird doctrine, and he used authority that he did not have. At least in our eyes, he would not have. I'm asking you, would you know this man? Would you know? I know how things work because I've been part of the church. When a pastor or a person does something against another pastor or another ministry, next thing you know, there is tons of gossip, and we lambast that pastor or along that lines, and he becomes ostracized from the church, even if he might not have been wrong. Here's Jesus has had the exact same thing happen to him. He has been labeled a wicked, wicked man, and he even begins to continue to prove this in the church. He is continuously proving that he is not a friend of God, at least in our eyes. But in reality is he knows God on a true level, but no one else does. And it's shocking. And so the Pharisees, the priest and the pastors of the time, they had enough. They send their subordinates to go take him. And some would have taken him, but no man laid hands on him. Then they came to the officers and the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they say unto him, Why have you not brought him? Why didn't you get him? And the officer answers, Never man spake like this man. The common people, the people underneath the pastors, underneath the things, we can't believe. No man ever speak like him. How could we lay a hand on him? And what's the response to the pastors of the time, the people who are supposedly the righteous people? Then answered them the Pharisees, Are ye also deceived? Have any of the rulers, have any of us, have any of the Pharisees believed on him? But this people who knows not the law are cursed. Have any of us believed? Do any of us know that think that Jesus is right? No, only the people that are sinners, only the people that know not the law, they're cursed. So we see right out completely, they say, only the people that don't know the law, only the people in their minds they're sinners, are following Jesus. So I'm going to ask you, as I'm painting this picture, truly ask yourself, would I know Jesus, this man that is being painted here? Because I go to church, I supposedly love God, and I follow what my pastors say, and would I know Jesus? Begin to truly think about this. If Jesus came today, would you know him? Would you know him? Mark 3:22. And the scribes which came down from Jerusalem said, He has Beelzebub, and by the prince of devils casteth he out devils. So not only now is he a sinner, he is possessed and claimed by the devil. And he works his miracles, and everything he does by the devil. This is the official declaration of all the pastors of the time. This man is a devil worshiper, and he is possessed by the devil. The big people of the church say this about Jesus. Mark 11. This is where Mark 11, where Jesus went in and they came to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple and began to cast out and sold and brought to the temple and otherwise the tables and the money changers, and set them that sold doves, and would not suffer any man should carry any vessel through the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations a house of prayer, but ye have made it into a den of thieves. As I was saying earlier, here, not only is he declared to have the devil, to be possessed by the devil, and cast out demons by the devil, he has weird doctrines, he is defied openly the church over and over again. Now he goes straight into the biggest church, the biggest place, and completely wreaks havoc. To the point now, that's it. They've had enough. The modern church, as I've already pointed out, we're not talking to people who say you can do anything and go to heaven. We're talking about the people who are preaching righteousness and holiness, preaching the law. You have to live right. We're talking about the people who, above all, in our eyes, would be right with God. Above all, would be right with God. And here, Jesus is defying these people. Outright defying these people. He's even called them whited sepulchres. And these people believe they're 100% that they're right with God. So they finally have enough. In John 18, they got one of his disciples, Judas, to betray him. And Judas, then having received a band of men and officers from the chief priest and the Pharisees, the chief priest, the chiefest of these, the people who we believe is the absolute most righteous and holy people in the world today, send a band of officers after Jesus with one of his own men, but one of the closest men to Jesus, because, Judas has had enough of this as well. Judas just does not see how this could be a righteous man either. He gets offended. I won't go into that, but he gets offended when Mary dumps the alabaster box on his feet. And Jesus is like, that could have been used for the poor. And Jesus rebukes him, openly rebukes him, and said, no, what she did is right. What you're thinking is wrong. So, now, not only the Pharisees, but even one of the men closest to him says, this man's not of God. And they send an entire band after Jesus. And, preaches, therefore, the lanterns and torches and weapons. And Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Who seek ye? And they openly declare, they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said unto them, I am he. And also Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. They openly ask him, he asked them, who are you after? And they say, we want Jesus. We come to take Jesus away because he's wicked. Now, everybody knows what happens to Jesus during the time. The Pharisees, they question him. They bring wrong accusation against him, beat him up, and lock him away. And then they bring him to Pontius Pilate in the morning. And Pontius Pilate judges him, sees he's not wicked, but to satisfy them, he has Jesus whipped. And the devil takes control of the people that are whipping him at that time. And they just whip him till he's almost dead. Completely whipped, almost dead with the cat of nine tails, whipping everything, all the skin and everything off of him, so that where you can't even really tell he's a man. Then they beat him brutally. And they send him back to Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate is like, whoa, behold the man! Behold the man! And look what's happened. He's righteous. He's a good man. Let him go. Pontius Pilate, it says in the scriptures that Pontius Pilate would want to have him free. And Pontius Pilate, who's a wicked man, even realizes that, and Pontius Pilate was also another sinner. Said, but this man's guiltless. But the people who are supposedly the church at the time did not see this. They said, no, he's a wicked man. Crucify him. So Pontius Pilate says, he basically says, I'm going to override you guys. I'm going to go out and I'm going to sit in the wide open. I'm going to bring Jesus with me, and I'm going to let the people decide what to do with Jesus. I'm not, no longer am I going to talk to you priests and Pharisees. I'm going to talk to the people, because he wanted to set Jesus free. And here he brings him out. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat him down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. So we see here, as I was saying, Pilate decides he's going to override the priests and the Pharisees that have been talking to him the whole time, the chief priest, and come out to the people. He sits Jesus out in an open position. And you got to remember, Jesus is now beaten and bruised and horrible looking. And it was a preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour, and he saith unto the Jews, behold your king! Look at this man. This is the man that's worked mighty miracles among you. This is the man that has gone around and healed your sick. This is the man that has changed the wickedness in the heart of all these people. That we're known sinners. I've heard about this man, and now I've seen him. I know he's a righteous man. But your priest, your current leaders that are supposed to be of God are telling me he's a wicked man. But I can tell, because it's just the righteousness pours off of him. He says, behold the man. What do you want me to do with him? Behold your king. But the people, the normal people of the day, and this is the modern church. This is as if it was the modern church. He brings them out openly. But they cried out, away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! And Pilate said unto them, shall I crucify your king? The chief priest answered, we have no king but Caesar. Then delivered he him therefore unto them to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. So not only the chief priest, not only the chief men, but the supposedly good people of the time say Jesus is a wicked man. He's done wicked things. He's an unholy person. Crucify him. That's what he deserves. Crucify him. The most horrible death thinkable. By the hands of everybody knows wicked men. And this is what happens to Jesus. So I ask you now, after I painted this picture of Jesus, as you've seen this picture of Jesus, as he truly was, if Jesus came in the flesh today, would you know him? Would you know Jesus? Would you know him? And then you begin to think about it. Why would I ask you this question? Why? And I began to ask God, why would you ask me this question? I don't know if I would know him. My God, I'd say I want to know him. But as I look at it, I don't know if I would. Honest to God, I don't know if I would. I've been in the church world all my life. And a lot of times I hear about pastors and people and different things that, all in all appearance, they've lost their way. But I don't know those people. I don't know if they're right or wrong. And here's Jesus hanging out with all the sinners, being in the nightclubs, being where known stuff is wrong. And then he destroys the top church of the time. He runs in there with a whip and starts whipping people and casting them out. Would I be one of those people that would say, crucify him? Would you be one of the people that say, crucify him? We claim to know God. We claim to love God. And now I get to the point. How many of us has seen people that aren't dressed to our standards, that don't look to our standards, that don't act to our standards, and judge them. For some reason, I know this is true because I've done it myself and I've watched it nonstop. Christians, the people who are supposed to know God, the people who are supposed to follow Jesus, and Jesus said, do not judge. The first thing almost every Christian does is when they meet somebody is weigh them against their standards. Is this guy right? Is this guy of God? That's the first thing we do. We judge somebody instantly, right off the bat. We weigh them to our standards instantly. I do it nonstop myself. But if we were to meet Jesus or hear about Jesus and we weighed him against those standards, would we know him? Would we know him? Or would we end up being one of those people that says to scream, crucify him in the end? Would you know Jesus? Some of the people, I've watched a lot of preachers in the internet because I long for the truth. And some of the people I've found that are right with God are some of the weirdest people out there. I mean, rolling on the floor, not even being able to speak when they're preaching, and making weird sounds. But their fruits are different than mine. They have a truth. They touch nations. They care for the least of these. When I look at the least of these, what that means is someone, maybe a beggar or someone who's just not someone that I would think that's really important. That isn't, profound or a Bible theologian. They care for the least of these. Just think about, the most vile, richest person you can think of, or the least important people you can think of. The people that you see on a daily basis and just go, oh yeah, they're there, whatever. But they care for the least of these. And that's exactly what Jesus said. These people are some of the weirdest people I've ever seen in my life. And we judge everyone according to our standards. But are those standards Jesus' standards? Should we really be judging? Would we know Jesus if he came in the earth today? Or would we end up being one of the people in the end there looking at this bruised, broken man? I can just now see the Pharisees among the people say, look at this man. Would God be with a man that's completely broken and bruised? Would God let someone that's righteous and holy be destroyed like that? Look at him. And they're mocking him. Look at him. God would never be with someone like him. Look at that. He's nothing but a complete blood mess. And the people would go, yeah, he's right. They're right. God would never be with someone like him. God would never be with someone that would hang out with sinners. God would never be with them. And next thing you know, they're screaming, crucify him, crucify him. Would you know Jesus if he came today? Would you know him? And that's what I'm going to leave you with. Search your heart, search your mind and soul. Change who you are. Jesus came for those, the least of these, those who we know are wicked and wrong. He didn't judge them. He hanged out with them. He loved them. We need to do the same. Change your heart. Pray. Ask God, change me, Lord.